Hello, Doc here for the ReadySetCrypto OMNIA newsletter market update for Sunday, the 23rd of February. Looking at Bitcoin versus the US dollar, what I like is happening here is that we're just moving into a bull flag. This is just a garden variety bull flag in the midst of a weekly swing to the upside. Now, as you're seeing right now, there's a lot of energy at the daily chart. So this is charged up, and there's a little bit of concern here that I have that the weekly chart doesn't necessarily support further upside. It can, and we've certainly seen, like down here as we had this breakout from basically exhausted conditions that surprised a lot of people. They said, that can't happen. The energy's in exhaustion. Well, guess what, guys? Price can do whatever it wants to do. But what we're looking for is probabilities here as to whether or not this is going to break higher or do anything. And right now I'm seeing the probability is that maybe we're just going to be range bound for a little while longer as we have to set up that higher low. We want to set up a higher low. We want to pull back a little bit. That's okay. In fact, that's really good. Sometimes, again, as I've said many times, you have to take a step back to take two steps forward. Back to the daily chart, the other thing I like seeing is that the very normal decline of volume in the pattern. None of this breakout has really come on extraordinary volume, really. But again, price is king. Price can do whatever it wants to. We have to respect what the price is doing. My concern has always been is that, okay, this rally is just another failed lower high. That doesn't seem to be the case, though. We're seeing awfully persistent price action. We're not seeing the same crazy stuff that we saw here. Anytime you have a market going vertical, this is where we typically lead to failure. And we've had this little mini bear for several months now. So I like the tenor and the tone of this one. It's moved into quiet and trending, stair-stepping price action. It's been very quiet. And it's sort of quietly, persistently heading higher. And sometimes these stealth market rallies can become very strong ones because nobody sees it coming. You don't see these big volume spikes. You don't see these big 1,000-point days coming along. It just it's what I call a creeper rally. Now, the bigger picture here, we still have this monthly pattern on the log chart, which is still obeying all of these trend lines. It's still obeying the trend and is starting to build up in energy now. Now, this is something that we haven't seen for quite some time, right? We had this massive exhaustion down here, and actually we did build up quite a bit of energy as the price chopped around. And this was early 2019. This is about a year ago. The price was just chopping. It built up a pretty decent amount of monthly energy at that point. And we saw that blow off to the upside quickly into exhaustion. And now we're building a more sustainable base. Markets are all about building a base. Think about building a house, right? You want to dig a deep footer, get that concrete down there, that high pressure concrete that can handle all that compression stress, and let it set up, and then you can build things on top of it that are not going to crack after a week or two. One last comment on Bitcoin is that after we set up this lower high, it did set up a lower low on the daily chart, but this downtrend has been very slight. And again, this is why I'm thinking that this is just a bull flag setting up at a larger time frame. And there's nothing wrong with this. This all looks really good. It's holding above decent fib levels, and I like what I'm seeing. So we just have to be patient for the next breakout. We're not always going to have this stair-stepping. Range expansion is going to lead to range contraction at a larger time frame. We have to understand why it's happening, and it's because we're starting to decline in energy on larger time frames. Now, as we look at the top 10, actually Ethereum looks really good for this perspective. Now, we did this expected move thing into the end of the month. I don't think we need that anymore. What I like right now is just how it's setting up. So let's remove this. Again, from an energy perspective, this is a really nice range expansion, range contraction pair. And what I'm particularly pleased by is that, this was one hell of a move. I mean, that really did get vertical on Ethereum in a very short period of time. And if we throw the chop index on here through the RSI Laguerre, we can see that, yeah, we did get into some major exhaustion, but now we're back up and ready to go again. Now on the weekly chart, that's an exhaustion. That's definitely exhaustion. But as we've seen in crypto, if you have demand, it really doesn't matter what some random study is going to show you. Price is always authoritative when we're looking at any kind of a study. So right now, if we're able to see price break above the 366 level, we could be on our way. And if we look at this on a much larger time frame, let's look at the monthly time frame. Look at that. This is all just nonlinear behavior. This is that base that I'm talking about. We've dug the footer in Ethereum. We've laid down the work over the last, several months. Look at how many months it is. That's well over a year. That's about a year and a half of base building in Ethereum. If this breaks above 300 to 360, this could have plenty of energy for the next move. And we're also seeing that based on the energy level on this chart. Okay, so good things are happening here. It's not necessarily in the manner that you would expect it to. It's not necessarily in the places that you're looking for. Okay, so as we get out of the top two and into some of the other coins here, we're going to see various things. Ripple finally printed a higher high, pulled back really hard. It's really had a difficult time getting out of that 28-cent level. So we'll continue to watch that. Good things happening on Litecoin. I like the structure here. Bitcoin Cash got a little ahead of itself, pulled back really strong, more so than other coins. Keep an eye on that. EOS, kind of the same thing. As we get down into the rest of the top 10 and below, some of these are dealing with the sins of this nearly vertical move that we had, which is never good. It's never good to see that, even though it's exciting and it's fun to be part of that. If you're on board for it, that's all great, but eventually you're gonna have to pay for it. So here's a good example of that is this was setting up a nice consolidation, but it actually broke to the downside. And if we look at this from a larger time frame perspective, I think we can see why. If we pull this out, throw the RSI Laguerre on there, we have a weekly exhaustion. So this had just nowhere to go. So the smaller time frame daily chart was fully charged up, chopped up to death, right? It had to go somewhere. And unfortunately had to go to the downside because the weekly chart says, the parent time frame in this case says, hold on there, I'm not going anywhere. And so that energy at the daily chart had to go somewhere. Look at all this energy. Had to go somewhere. If it can't go higher, it must go lower. Here's Tezos, looks really good. Here is Stellar, looks all right. Doesn't look great. Chainlink is phenomenal. This is a great pattern. Really looks good. Daily chart, a lot of energy there. Let's see what we have on the weekly chart. Okay, so this may require a lot more base building, and this ultimately may turn into an enormous cup with handle pattern. Enormous is all subjective. We're dealing with anywhere from $1.50 per coin up to about $5. So this would project somewhere up to just below $10 per coin. And as we continue down the top 20, here's 0x, basic attention token. A lot of these look kind of the same. Zcash, and on, right? As we go further down the list, we're starting to see patterns that are pretty much duplicates of everything else. And even Monero here, about the same. I mean, we can look at the top two and really see the health of this market right now. And between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum looks really good right now, though. So what I hope we don't run into is the same thing as, let's see, which was that coin that we talked about down here? Was that Chainlink? No, that was Ethereum Classic, right? Where it had to go somewhere, it had to go to the downside. So Ethereum hopefully doesn't have to go through the same bit there. Again, guys, just a reminder, we're starting to feed trades. These are system trades we're starting to feed into the community trade channel, right? So this channel, community trades channel, which is in our Discord area. If you're an OMNIA member and if you're not on there yet, so there, for with every newsletter, there is an invite code where you can set yourself up onto our server with a Discord ID. And then all we need to know is what your email address and your Discord ID is, so we can match the two together and set you up with a permission. So right now what we have is a trend trading strategy feeding buys and sells onto there. And I've been busy looking at other ones to add as well. Now let's look at Chainlink for a second. So Chainlink has been chopping around. And if you try to be playing this to the upside or downside, you'd be doing okay for a while. Let's just say you're long only, because maybe you're, and that's a good assumption for, I'd say 95% of customers out there that have long only accounts. If you want to do short, you either have to have a margin account or you're using futures on one of the few pairs that offers futures. So most of the trades that we're going to do in this type of system trading scenario are going to be long only. And that, I think, is going to work for most people. I'm a big believer in using fractal principles whenever we can. So if we're dealing with Chainlink here, what we want to do is let's wait for a weekly uptrend if we can. Or at least, at the very least, a weekly swing, because many times we don't know if it's going to turn into an uptrend, but we can certainly play inside of a swing. Yes? And this is what I'm always saying about rule number one is trade in the direction of the anchor chart swing. All right. So if we trade in the direction of that anchor chart swing to the upside, this is going to help our trades. This is going to help filter things. It's not going to necessarily prepare us for when all of a sudden it starts turning into a downswing. We need to know when to stop that. But if we trade within upswings on a larger time frame, we're going to significantly filter out a lot of the garbage that happens with system trading. And that's why a lot of the strategies that you'll see me take are based on the Larry Connors rule of waiting until the daily chart has got the price above the 200-day moving average, which implies a longer term uptrend. And so just by extension, we're using fractal principles in there, looking for uptrends, and we're not going to get the very bottom tick of a swing. We're going to wait until it starts to swing higher, and then we'll play in it once it proves itself that it wants to swing higher. So that's one way to do it. There's other ways to do it as well. Now, I've applied a strategy which is called the double sevens. What we're looking for is, as the price is above the 200-day moving average, we're looking for a 7-period low to buy. So of the last 7 days, if we have a low of the last 7 days, we're going to be buying, and then we're going to sell on a 7-day high. Now, the problem with this one is that we don't really have any signals to go off of here, because Chainlink versus the US dollar has only been trading on Coinbase for a small period of time. And so we've got one total closed trade, and it looks fine. Let's go ahead and format that. Let's just, instead of the default of 100,000, we'll just go with $5,000. And what we'll say is that every trade that we're putting $100 into every trade, okay, which is 2%. So this might be an example of where we're using a fixed risk position. We're just using a small piece of capital for a trade. We're not over trading our account because perhaps we need capital for other trades, or we have other holds in play. Again, keeping your position size small is always a good idea. So in this case, we actually have, we're 100% profitable. This looks great, but okay, one opportunity as we've gotten the price above the 200-day moving average, and one buy, one sell, great. What happens though if we take this fractal perspective to the next level? And if we say, okay, if it's good at the 200-day moving average on the daily chart, what if we go to 5x faster? So let's go to a 5-hour chart. And now all of a sudden we have lots of signals. So we're going to sell on a 7-bar closing low, or buy on a 7-bar closing low, and we're going to sell on a 7-bar closing high from there. Then all of a sudden, wow, we have a lot of signals to play here. We have 21 total closed trades. We have a ridiculous profit factor in this case of 3.5. And we have 76% of our trades are closing profitable. Now, if you get a good entry on something like this, you can always find different ways to close down trades or close down part of your risk or protect your profits and see if you can run something a little bit longer. That's the whole idea. You're always trying to mess around with your reward to risk and make it better. And for those of you, I had to learn this myself, but basically here's the zero line. We are profitable on all the trades. And this is basically the aggregate equity curve because we had one winner here and then we gave it back. And then we started going on a string of winners, had a couple of losers here, winners, losers, winners. And, and most recent trade was apparently a loser in here. So here's my point. I'm not trying to point out to you guys, well, like, hey, look at what have happened, because anybody can do that. Anybody can go backwards in time and say, well, look, you could have or would have or should have been in on this particular coin. The point here is that if you have something, if you have an asset which is starting to move in a linear fashion, then there's all kinds of ways that you can play with that. So again, a five-hour chart on something like this is going to produce a really nice looking equity curve because it's going to give you a lot of entries, buys and sells into there. Now you can always go up in time frame, but again, here's just one buy and sell. But if you expand on that and play in the same direction as that swing, then you've got many, many more opportunities. So I'm not exactly sure how we're going to split these out just as of yet. I mean, ideally, a lot of people are not going to be in and out of 5-hour trades, right? So not everybody has time and access to be able to get in and get out of trades that are going to fire every couple of days like this. This is why we have the trend trading strategy, which the whole idea behind that one is to get you in early enough, even though it does have a lower winning rate, get you in early enough that you'll be able to pull off one of these big, long swings. That's the whole idea behind it. So I think ultimately the goal is to come up with a mix of strategies, and we'll probably have several different trading channels where you can kind of subscribe to the level of activity and the level of risk that you're really looking to do. And, looking forward to doing a lot more work onto that and making this service, I would say, much more trading oriented than we have over the last couple of years. The last couple of years have been more about building the foundation for what we want to do. And now it's time to kind of like put the rubber to the road, especially if we're going to get some kind of a rally out of this major base that we've been building for the last 2 years. Let's, put the accelerator down and see what we can make of this. One quick note I want to let you guys know about is that I'm going through the final drafts of my book on fractal energy trading, and it should be, I'm doing air quotes here, but it should be for sale by the end of this week in paperback format. It looks really good, and I'm just finishing off the last couple of tweaks and getting the last couple of typos out of it, and then it'll be for sale probably by the end of the week. So I'm very excited about this. This is something I've been meaning to do for a long time and finally got it done. So with that, thanks for listening to today's report, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care now.